Hey guys, this is Justin at the Survivor Review, and today we're talking about Halloween Kills. David Gordon Green's follow-up to his 2018 soft reboot, direct sequel to the original, which I haven't seen since theaters. I meant to rewatch it before seeing Kills, I just didn't have the time, and honestly my initial opinion of that movie was very mixed. I liked a lot of elements of it, but I also had a lot of issues with it. I wasn't as in love with it as a lot of people were. But that being said, I was still really looking forward to this movie. Even though I knew this movie was kind of leaning more towards the gore and the violence, which is something I don't really like when Halloween movies do. I prefer them to be suspenseful and almost bloodless like the original. I was still really looking forward to this one. There's a lot of cool things going for it, like bringing back original cast members and stuff like that. So on initial viewing, it's a mixed bag. More so than the 2018 one. The 2018 one is pretty solid. It's just a flawed but a solid movie. This one, I will say I came out of it pretty entertained, but I have a lot more issues with it, and I have a lot of problems with the movie. It's weird with this movie. I feel like whenever I say a positive thing, I have to say, but, I love seeing original cast members come back. That was cool. But the way they utilized them wasn't that great, and they weren't utilized as much as I feel like they should have been. And there's a lot of things like that. There's a lot of things that I really did enjoy about this movie, but it has a lot of issues. I will start out by saying that the opening of this movie I thought was fantastic. Probably the first act or so, I was so into, and I was really digging it. The opening scene, it is blatant fan service. It's pure fan service. But being such a huge fan of the original movie, I ate it up. I didn't care. I was like, this is great. I was loving it. I love the opening scene. I'm going to delve into it when I get into spoilers, but I thought the opening scene was great. Just the way this movie picks up right after the last one, how it Halloween 2's it, but it picks up right after the previous movie, and it's still set on that night. There's just a lot of momentum towards that opening, and I thought it was really great. I was like, I'm really digging this. But then it hits a point where it kind of starts to sag a little, and then the movie starts to get kind of sloppy. There's a lot of great ideas in here, and a lot of concepts that I really like. So it's just kind of sloppily executed, and the pacing is really kind of up and down. The movie, when we cut to Laurie Strode in the hospital and all the returning characters, it has this chaotic energy to it, where it's Tommy Doyle, who was the kid that Jamie Lee Curtis was babysitting in the original, and he's just basically gathering up a mob to go after Michael. And it has this kind of chaos, this sense of paranoia that I love. And this is what I expected the movie to be, coming off of the trailers and stuff. And even though I prefer Halloween movies to be kind of slow-paced and, suspenseful, like I was saying, I was okay with this movie being chaotic and fast and crazy because it makes sense continuing off of the previous film. It's a good extension of that. I get it, but it actually doesn't do that. It does and it doesn't. The pacing is off and on. It starts and stops throughout. When you cut to Tommy and the mob group, it's this crazy chaotic stuff, and then it cuts to this other stuff, and it's just kind of slow. And kind of taking its time, and I'm like, and it doesn't. I wish it had that kind of chaotic energy throughout. The main character of this movie is the town of Haddonfield, which I think is a really cool idea. I actually really like the idea. I love the idea of them forming this mob and trying to go after Michael. I really like that idea, and I think that's cool, but then certain things kind of get pushed to the side. Like Allison, Laurie Strode's granddaughter, who is a lead character in the last movie, and she should be one of the main leads of the series. In this film, she kind of gets pushed to the side. She barely appears throughout the movie. She pops up every once in a while, and oh yeah, Allison's still there. And it's kind of surprised me how little she gets to do in the movie. And then also, Laurie Strode doesn't get as much to do in this movie, and I know that was some people's complaints, and I'm actually okay with that. I'll delve into it more in spoilers, but the fact that Jamie Lee Curtis, it's not that she doesn't appear in the movie a lot. She does appear throughout the entire thing. It's that she spends the entire movie in a hospital room. And I can understand people being disappointed about that. I know the trailers kind of advertised it a lot, with her going after Michael, and you think that's what this movie's going to be about. It's not about that. She kind of takes a back seat to the action, but I thought that worked. I actually was okay with that. I had no problem with that. Like I said, I'll get to in spoilers why, because it has to do with Michael's motivation, which I thought was well handled. This movie gets things both right and wrong. One of the things it gets right, though, is Michael Myers. James Jude Courtney, who played him in both previous film and this one, is fantastic and easily one of the top actors to play Michael Myers. Like, he gets the mannerisms down, he gets like the feel of the character right. There's a couple of moments where he kind of does stuff that's kind of like off kind of character from Michael and feels kind of weird, but that's more so the writing, less so the performance, and I thought he nailed it. And the best thing about this movie, which was the best thing about the previous film, is the score. The John Carpenter score is incredible, and this is going to be the best thing to come out of this whole trilogy. Halloween Ends hasn't even come out yet, and I already know the best thing to come out of this whole trilogy is going to be the soundtracks for each film, because yeah, it's incredible, just as good as the 2018 score. There's some incredible tracks in here. There's even like a new kind of slight different variation on the Halloween theme that plays in the opening credits. That was also great. Like I said, the best thing to come out of these movies is that they got John Carpenter to come back to do the score. Him, Cody Carpenter, and Daniel Davis just knock it out of the park. Just incredible stuff. So in the long run, I think I was entertained. Like, I definitely am not as negative towards this movie as other reviews have been, but it's not without its issues, and there's a lot of flaws, and it's, like I said, a mixed bag of a movie. So that's kind of my initial spoiler-free thoughts. Now I'm just going to delve into all the spoilers and stuff, so if you haven't seen this movie and you want to, stop now and, you know, go check it out. And if you've seen it or you just don't care, then keep watching. I'm going to discuss some spoiler stuff for this movie. So I'm going to begin at the beginning with the opening scene that I talked about earlier. This movie opens with a flashback to 1978. And it's recreated perfectly. They even try to recreate the lighting and kind of the camera work of the original, and they try to kind of get that Dean Cundy cinematography. It's not quite perfect, but they try to emulate that style to where it feels like you're watching scenes from the original, and I thought it was so cool. You know, I know it's kind of like the simplest thing to say, but I don't know, I dug it. The look of Michael Myers is great. The mask looks fantastic. It looks really close to the original, and there's so many like nods and callbacks that like I said are obvious fan service, but like the fact that they went through that effort to recreate that, like they enter the Michael Myers house and you have the dead dog in there, you're even just the broken window on the top floor in Judith Myers' room, like just there's so many details that are recreated to a T. It's fantastic. And then you get to the most craziest thing ever is that you have Loomis. Dr. Loomis appears in here, which one makes me really happy because everyone says that Jamie Lee Curtis is kind of like, you know, the face of the series. But to me, it's always been Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis. Like, to me, that's the character, because he's so connected to Myers. Like, I know Jamie Lee Curtis in the original timeline is his sister and stuff, but still, like, I feel like there's much more of a connection between Loomis and Myers, and he's always been, to me, kind of like the face of the series. So I loved in the 2018 film when they had that kind of tribute where they had his like voiceover at one point. I thought that was a great tribute to the character. This one takes it one step further and literally shows Dr. Loomis, and I don't know what they did. I believe that they got a look-alike and then probably did some like CGI tweaking to kind of make it look closer, because it looks just like Donald Pleasance. Like, it's kind of insane, and it doesn't look creepy CGI like Tarkin in Rogue One. It looks just like, it looks like a real dude who just looks like Donald Pleasance. The one thing I will say is the voice sounded kind of off, which kind of confused me because the voice in the 2018 one was like perfect. And this one the voice didn't sound quite right. All the flashback stuff I enjoyed. And I like that they showed how they captured Myers, because that's one thing I didn't like about the 2018 film, is how they're just like, oh yeah, Myers got captured in 78. And I'm like, when did that happen? Like, I didn't like that they were kind of like adding that thing on. It felt like a cheap way just to get Michael Myers locked up again at the opening so he could break out again. You know? And this actually shows, it still doesn't like justify that decision, but this one at least kind of shows it and helps kind of bridge the gap and make it a bit more clear. And it's kind of neat that they made Lonnie into like a major player in this series, and he was just that random side character bully in the first film. I thought that's neat. I really like the idea of Tommy putting together this mob to go after Michael. It's just this where you get to kind of like the poor execution of certain things. It comes off as kind of silly, and like, you know, when you have the townspeople chanting "Evil dies tonight," which, oh my god, how many times do they say that in this movie? You can make a drinking game of every time someone says "Evil dies tonight" or "Haddonfield 40 years ago," because that gets brought up so much. And it just comes off as kind of silly, and there's some really bad dialogue. Yeah, the other thing that happens while the mob stuff is going on is that we keep cutting to Michael Myers' house, which is owned by this couple. And I actually love this idea of the Myers home is just now a house that people live in, you know? They just kind of moved on from the murder that happened in one of the bedrooms. It's just a home that they live in. And from being a diehard fan of the series, seeing the Myers home, which is kind of this like iconic like image in the franchise, and seeing it like all redressed like it's a livable home, you know? I think that's really cool, and I like that idea, but that's where you kind of get to some of the kind of issues I feel like I have with like David Gordon Green and Danny McBride and their like screenwriting, is that they really like to do quirky characters, which is not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but I do feel like we kind of linger on them a bit too much. And there is a lot of time spent with the couple that lives in the house, Little John and Big John. And I don't know, I'm not saying it was awful by any means, it just didn't quite engage me. I enjoyed the stuff earlier with the trick-or-treaters who are wearing the silver shamrock masks, which I love bringing the silver shamrock stuff in there. And the fact that like they had him really briefly in 2018, it was a really quick, almost like blink and you miss it cameo. And the fact that the masks appear in this movie a lot more, and is like used when Michael strings up the victims in the park. Like, that's so freaking cool. It's fan service, but it worked for me. I'm okay with that. I'll take it. But yeah, whenever time we're cutting back to Big John and Little John, the pacing of the movie just kind of comes to a halt, in my opinion. Like, you have like this crazy stuff going on. It's really like intense with the mob and everything. And then you cut back to Big John and Little John. They're like hanging out at their house. And I'm like, And I want to bring it back to the returning cast members. You have Tommy Doyle, like I mentioned. Anthony Michael Hall is the one new actor coming in. Then you have Lindsay Wallace. And then you have Marian Chambers, who are both played by the original actors. Sheriff Brackett, he's not Sheriff anymore, but Sheriff Brackett is there. He's the other returning character. I love seeing him in here. That's so great. I never thought I'd ever see, like, Sheriff Brackett back again in his movies. I'm just going to keep calling him Sheriff Brackett. I know he's not Sheriff anymore, but I'm going to keep calling him that. I never thought I'd see Charles Cyphers back in these movies. Like, that's so sweet. That being said, though, they kind of cheated in that at one point they cut the footage from Halloween 2. Which works because it's the same cast members and it looks exactly like the original movie, so it works, but I'm kind of like, you cheated there a little bit. But, you know, either way, though, like I said, it was cool seeing them. I don't think their use in the storyline was very good. Tommy Doyle was only one of them as kind of like a lead character, and he was, for the most part, pretty good. He felt kind of off at times, and like I said, some of the writing for him was kind of dumb. But aside from him, the rest of the cast is very underutilized. Marian Chambers comes back just to kind of like die in the next scene, which didn't really affect me too much because I've already seen her die before in Halloween H2O. But like I was like, oh, okay, and you know, it was cool. I like that she was given a good moment to like a moment for them to mourn her, though. Like when Tommy and all the guys, when they find her body strung up with the witch mask over it, they had that moment where they stop and kind of mourn her, which, you know, is a lot more than they gave Sheriff Brackett. Because Sheriff Brackett, he's just kind of there. He pops up every once in a while. He's there in the crowd scenes in the hospital. That's it. And I'm like, he's in the hospital, same hospital that Laurie's at, and they don't even get a scene together. Like, it would have been really cool to give Charles Cyphers and Jamie Lee Curtis a scene together, you know what I mean? I would have loved that. But you don't even get that. And then he pops up at the end during the big climactic fight against Michael. And which is funny, I kind of found that funny. I'm like, why would you bring 80-year-old Charles Cyphers to your mob thing? And then he just gets his throat slashed super quickly and we move on. And I was like, hey. It's very unceremonious. Like, I was really kind of bummed that he just like, a quick shot, throat slash, alright, anyway. And I'm like, Lindsay survived, though that's good. I really hope that means they're going to bring her back in Halloween Ends. That'd be pretty cool. It's just that, yeah, in the long run, the legacy characters, it was cool to see them. It just wasn't executed as well as it could have been. Like, they could have had more to do, especially with this movie being about the town of Haddonfield. Like, there's a lot more opportunities for them to be more involved in the story than how they were. But, you know, it is what it is. I want to go back to Laurie and her place in the story, like I kind of briefly mentioned earlier. I love how in the long run, Laurie's not important at all to the story. And I kind of love that. I love that it harkens back to Michael being this motivationless killer who's just there to kill. You know, in the original Halloween, he was just stalking babysitters. And they do kind of bring that up in the last film. It's only, you know, because the doctor brings Michael to Laurie's home that he's actually going after her. And this continues that even more so, to the point where, like, everyone's freaking out. She's freaking out. She's like, oh my god, he's coming for me. He's coming to the hospital. We have to, like, barricade the hospital. Like, he's coming. And Michael's just over here, going to his home. I kind of love that. I love that, like, he doesn't give a crap about her. And I think that's really cool. You know, I'm not trying to say that in anything disrespectful against the character or Jamie Lee Curtis. I mean that literally just in terms of the story that felt very true to Michael Myers. He's not motivated by anything. And I love that. And I actually give Jamie Lee Curtis props for that, for not being like, oh, I'm Laurie Strode, you know? I'm the most important character here. This is about me. Obviously, this is leading for Halloween Ends for her to be a major part in there, especially with how this movie ends with Karen dying. It really makes me intrigued in what they're going to do with Halloween Ends. I know that they've already said they're going to have a time jump. It's not going to take place immediately after Kills. It's going to take place 4 years later in current time, like in 2022 when it comes out. And I'm okay with that, because this movie is leaning towards kind of the supernatural element, kind of the idea of Michael kind of haunting this town. And I wonder if they're going to really lean into that. There is this unused script for Halloween 4 where it was kind of like that, where it's kind of like just the spirit in a sense of Michael Myers is kind of haunting this town because of what he's done, because of the chaos that he's caused, and how it's kind of messed with the townspeople. And I feel like this movie has already kind of started a bit with that, with all the mob stuff. And I would really love for it to kind of lean into that. It's always an idea that I've loved and thought would be a really cool thing to explore in a Halloween film. So that's really interesting to like pick up 4 years later, knowing that Michael Myers is still out there. Like, that's a scary concept, and I really hope that they could pull that off. Another problem I have with the movie is the way the writers kind of handle like the legacy of Michael Myers. I feel like, and this is something that kind of bleeds over from 2018 a little bit, there's a lot of moments where the writers kind of treat Myers like he is this big mythical figure that's been around for the last 40 years, when in this timeline, he was a guy who killed 3 people 40 years ago and has been locked up ever since. You know what I mean? And I know there's some play with it with like Myers is kind of Haddonfield's like celebrity and the one thing that Haddonfield's known for. So it is kind of something that's haunted the town a little bit. But I feel like everyone's reaction to things, especially when the mob like really starts going crazy trying to go after Michael, it feels more like it's built up because of Michael's legacy as a pop culture icon, as a killer who's been around for all these years, less so than town going after this guy, if that makes any sense. Kind of similar to 2018, where I thought it was a little kind of silly how like Laurie is like booby trapping her house, and she's like, you know, I'm prepared for when he comes back, when like he's been locked up for 40 years and there's no indication that he's gonna come back, that he's gonna break out again. There's a lot of character dialogue that kind of reflects that too, and just to me kind of makes Michael Myers out to be this bigger figure than he really should be in this timeline. Overall, it's a mixed bag. Like, I feel like this whole video has been kind of all over the place, where I'm talking about stuff I like and stuff I don't like, and that's kind of the movie. You know, it's full of elements that I really enjoyed, and full of stuff that was like, not so great. You know, it's, like I said, it is made with love for the franchise, and you can definitely see that in the 78 flashback, which I still think is freaking awesome, and, you know, bringing back the original cast. But it's just kind of a sloppy script, and not as well put together. I really hope that when they do Halloween Ends, they have a more polished script, and it's a proper, like, good send-off to this series, and kind of a good way to kind of end this kind of legacy trilogy is kind of what I consider. It's kind of like the legacy trilogy that, you know, is a direct sequel to the original. And I hope Halloween ends it off properly and does a better job than this film did in continuing this story. So yeah, that's Halloween Kills. And that's all I have to say for now. So until next time, talk to you guys later.